Thank you. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate, and I do appreciate this bookstore. It's been a really mainstay in this community, and there should be more bookstores like this throughout Minneapolis. I wish there were more. Tonight I'm going to do something different than I normally do. I'm not going to talk so much about the book, but I'm going to talk about how I came to publish this book and how I came to learn all about Rolf Brandt, who is actually German, but he lived most of his life in London, and he was born in 1906 and died in 1986. So I want to begin by saying something about myself, not boasting or anything like that. When I started teaching at universities, I became really enamored of authors and illustrators who were not well known and really deserved to be known. And I also became a book collector. In fact, I would describe myself as a junkie. In particular, I would describe myself as being a flea market junkie, although I did go into bookstores, antique bookstores or shows and so on. And over the years, I gathered something like 10,000 books in my, there used to be 10,000 books until my wife vowed to throw me out with the books if I didn't start selling them or giving them to libraries, which I've been doing. And so I've traveled literally. I've spent I would say half my life in Europe. I've lived a long time in London, in Paris, in Rome, in the major cities. And while I lived there, I sought out these fairs. And there was one in particular in it's Portobello Road. If you ever go back to London, if you love antiques and old books and crazy people, nutty people, really wonderful, that's the place to go. And so sometime, I don't remember the exact date, when I was there, I think it was the 1980s, and I would always spend a good day or half a day at Portobello Road, and I came across these books illustrated for the most part by Rolf Brandt, and I said, this guy's really what Jews would say, meshuggah, crazy. And he really drew my attention, and there were several books that he had illustrated without any authors. Maybe his name was on these books, and they were really, I thought, priceless, but very cheap. So I bought about 5 or 10 of the books and brought them back with me. And I did that over the years with many other authors and illustrators. And when it came time to, and I just used to look at them or read them and feel it was like an upper, getting a shot of something and really making me feel that life is worth living. And in particular, Rolf Brandt really drew my attention because he worked mainly with pencil. Almost all of his illustrated works in books. He was also a painter as well as an illustrator. But all of the illustrated books that I know of, although he did do some watercolor works, were with pencil. And I was just floored by what he could accomplish using just pencils. So I would look at his works every now and then and say, really more people should know about him. And why wasn't he ever listed? Nobody, why didn't he get a long Wikipedia and things like that? I put all that thinking aside, and when it came to my retirement from the University of Minnesota in 2008, I was looking for I'm a workaholic, as you probably sense. I decided that I would like to explore what I have in my library. Maybe there's some interesting or important books that I should look at. And my sort of instinct was, are these books still relevant for our times? In other words, are they really, there are a lot of wonderful painters and writers and so on, but these writers, these classical writers and so on who are still appealing may not be significant with regard to the contradictions, chaos, and difficult times that we're having in the world today. And so my motto was, as I began looking at my books, I started contacting the University of Minnesota Press, Wayne State University Press, where I had really good relations. And I said, I want to do a series of and it may take 10 years or more, or something like that. And they said at the beginning, okay, let's try one book a year. I said, that's too little. I've got 10,000 books, and I've got to get, I really want to get the best and republish them. And I managed to work with them until they got tired of me for about 4 years. And that led us to 2018, where I said, screw it. You know, I'm going to take I get some fairly good royalties from my other books. I'm going to take the royalties from my books from Princeton, and I'm going to found a new press. And since I also like to work with animals and have an animal who runs my life at home, I decided to look into this sort of design it was of a mole and a honey bear, and the honey bear eating the bear eating all the honey, and the poor little mole that's doesn't get anything. It sort of like reflects our family at home. My poor wife has to put up with a lot. So what happened was I broke with both the University of Minnesota and Wayne State University Press, and grounded in 2008, or founded the series. And I think some of the books are, if I'm not, are some of those books still around? We
have the holiday packs.
Oh, okay, great.
So you get one of each.
Oh, great. At a discount, right? I hope.
I think so.
No? Okay.
It's the price you told me.
So I jumped in, and I published about 4 or 5 books that are really amazing and really do touch upon what is happening today. They range from an eco novel by Maurice Durand, and to and a lot of the writers are from actually Great Britain or Europe, not from the United States, and they all had experience in wars in Europe. All of these artists, illustrators, and writers. And when it came down to Brandt, I realized that that he may have children. I didn't know too much about him. I thought that, you know, I better look into the copyrights on this. And I began exploring by writing England, was the England studio. And they had his paintings on the walls there, I'd sold many of the paintings, and I thought I would try first with this studio. So I wrote a long letter saying that I was a professor, but also a publisher, and I'm stunned by the works of Rolf Brandt, and I'm thinking of putting 2 books that he illustrated of fairy tales. There are two books together in this one book, as you see up there. that actually, that's my title, that I gave these two books, and I edited them because there was a lot of anachronistic errors in the text, and I got an answer from the studio saying, yes, we don't have the rights, but there are 3 children from his marriage, and one of them is in India, and I have to, she's the key person. Her name is Savita Brandt, and I'll see if I can get in touch with her. It may be difficult because she is in India. So I waited and waited. I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to. 2 weeks went by, 3 weeks, a month. And then finally, I got this long letter from the studio saying that Savita Brandt would like to get in touch with you. But at the same time, there are also 2 other children, Susan Brandt, who lives in London, and also Nick Brandt, who lives in France. And I said, well, who's going to sort of moderate? Can you do that? And she said, no, I think Savita will do it. Her real name is Judy. So I got in touch with her, and she told me that she would sell me the rights to publish the book, or 2 books in one. And but gradually I found out that all 3, that I was going to have problems because the 3 siblings hated each other.
Oh.
And one, you know, whatever one wrote to me, the other one would write something not very complimentary about the other, and this went back. It took me a month or 2 before I said, look, all I want to do is give you the money, you know, it was about $2,000, and let me do this. And they said, but we want to check everything. And I said, no, when you know, I'm going to edit the book, I'm going to do a great job, and so on. But by the way, the book that I had, and you can't find the books anymore, any of his books, and the book that I had was from the 1940s, and the 1940s, the paper was really terrible. So I had to use a book that was very delicate, very fragile, I would say. And I did my best. I found this really great graphic artist who cleaned up all the books. The 2 books. There were 2 books, and the outcome is the book that you will see, which is really an astonishing, if I must say so myself. It's really an amazing accomplishment, particularly because the siblings are still after me for different things. So I was supposed to give a talk actually right now in London. I'm glad I'm not there because they would have, at least Savita would have come. No, Savita was in India. So Susan would have come out and attacked me or something like that. But none of that happened. We're still semi-friends. They're trying to get copies to sell in London because I don't have a distributor over there, but they do have copies. So that leads up to certain things I do want to say about Rolf Brandt. His father was born in London, so his father was literally, it's sort of like the United States. If you're born here, I think you're immediately you become American. And so he was considered a British citizen, and he came in Hamburg from an extremely wealthy family, amazingly wealthy family. And there were 4 Brandt sons. One of them, some of you may know of Billy Brandt, one of the great photographers in the world, actually. And that was his brother. That was Rolf's brother. So, and Bill Brandt was about a year or 2 older than Rolf Brandt. one of the, I'll just mention, one of the eldest took over the family business. They fled from the Nazis in 1933. They were anti-fascist. And so the Brandt brothers grew up with heavy German accents. And Rolf, who was born in 1906, wanted to become an actor. He did become an actor, and he always had to play evil people, because I speak with that German accent like that. So he was a very good actor, but the roles were very limited due to that huge accent. And he went to Germany in the 1920s, and it was there he met the love of his life, a young Danish woman, and they then traveled to Switzerland, where they attended an artist colony, and they became rapidly politicized. The 1920s, most of you probably know, particularly in Germany, the Weimar period was fantastic. It was fantastic, but it was also very, there were tremendous killings and assassinations. And the communist parties were formed in France and Italy, and they had to contend with far-right groups, militia groups. And so this was a period that also generated great art. I mean, some of the greatest German or European artists developed during these times. And so Rolf and he was very close to Bill Brandt. They were really very, very close throughout their lives. And so at a certain point in 1933, he was still a young, you have to remember he was still in his 20s. He joined the Communist Party and went to, he was part, because of his father was British, so-called British, he had dual nationalities. And so he became, during this time in 1933, in the 30s, he continued acting. He also, when the war broke out, he became a fireman. He wasn't able to serve in the army because he had that dual citizenships, but he wanted to contribute in some way. And then the bravest thing he did was, because of his fluent German, and he would go back up until 1938. During the 1930s, he was in the Communist Party, and they asked him whether he could disguise himself, and because he was an ex-actor, could he, as a German businessman who had to do works in Prague or Berlin or wherever. And so in the late 30s, he saved hundreds of Jews by bringing false papers, very authentic papers, and he got them out of Europe to England, and then a lot of them settled there and so on. But Brandt was also somewhat disappointed with the Communist Party, and so he very early in the 40s he dropped out of the Communist Party. This was because of Stalin's trials, murder trials, during the 1930s, and he began illustrating. And there's still a lot of mystery, because I know the Brandt family very well by mail, and I don't want to know them closer than that. I wanted to really, they had to know something, and I realized that Brandt had married 2 or 3 different women, and so he had other children around, but nobody could explain to me. Brandt's German or English was minimal. he couldn't write all that well, and he certainly couldn't translate. Yet, all the books that came out of this, it's called the Peter Lunn Publishing House, hired him to do illustrations, and I haven't been able to discover who did translations because all the Brandt children swear he couldn't do that. That's the only thing they've ever agreed upon in their lives. So that is still a mystery for me because he worked with this firm, Peter Lunn, that was started. The editor of Peter Lunn was a young Jewish, German Jewish man who fled the Nazis and had enough money to start the Peter Lunn publishing house. And the word Peter, the reason he chose Peter Lunn was because the captain of the British skiing team in the Olympics in 1936 in Germany was Peter Lunn, who refused to talk to Hitler when he won a medal. And so that, the name Peter Lunn, he wanted that to be symbolic, you know, for the type of books that he did, because most of the books he did were political, very political. And it also drew Brandt to him. But again, the publishing house died in 1938. And so, and then I don't know what happened to the publisher. He seemed to have disappeared. And nobody, I've written letters to all sorts of scholars, people who knew him or the family and so on. And so it's still unknown as to who did the translating of a lot of the books. Some of the books, for instance, he did, and I'll show you an illustration from a couple of books of Russian tales. He also did a book of tales of Melville, Hawthorne, Poe. Of course, he didn't have to translate anything for those books, but for the Russian books, he certainly didn't do, he didn't know Russian, so he couldn't do those. So it's sort of a mix with regard to, well, I wouldn't call it a mix, I would call it a mystery with regard to how these books came about. But the publishing house went bankrupt in 1939, and that led to, it was fortunate because he was a superb teacher of art. And so he had to find a job in when was it? It was actually at the end of the war. And he began teaching at the University of London art students for about 20 or 30 years. And most of the students who have some sort of memory of him said he was just astonishing. He was constantly learning. And this was a period, and if some of you later want to come, I have 2 catalogs of exhibitions of his works that are just, maybe I'll pass it around from here. Just remember to give it back to me, or I'll kill you. Start over here. So he had exhibitions in the 1970s, and as I said, by the 1980s, he died in 1986. In 1980s, he was actually moving. He constantly was learning, and he became more and more of a surrealist. And the paintings are just mind-blowing. When you get the books and look at the work that he's done, and a lot of the, as I said early on, he worked mainly with pencils, and the books, the fairy tale books, were always in pencil. And then he he already knew, but he developed more along different, he experimented with different methods. And he was part of I would say, a generation from the Weimar period up through this period who really marked modern art, the development of modern art. So that's sort of the background, the story that my wife told me not to tell tonight. But I thought it'd be much more interesting because you really get a sense of who this person was, and you can see in the books and in the catalogs here how unusual he was. So I want to, however, I do want to comment a bit on some of the tales. So let's start off.
Could I ask a quick
Yes.
yes or no question?
Yes.
Did Bill Brandt also teach?
Yes, he
So
did.
were they
He
were
did.
also
No, but
in
Bill
this
Brandt,
period?
he was really he would travel all over the place. So he had no time for a stable, let us say, appointment the way his brother did, Rolf. But Rolf, they worked very closely together, and they did work together. So when this goes around, you'll see, I think you love his work. So this is the inside tale of the book that I published, and I've taken this sort of this illustration because it's a very comical one. It's actually Rapunzel, and he can't climb up the tower, and there's this ghost-like man. So he has these surprising, the tales that appear in print are critiqued by his illustrations. They're very unusual or extraordinary, and there's a sort of a delightful, biting humor that he had. Let's move on to the next one. So this is from one of the Russian books, and as you can see, he has this hero that's chopping up different types of characters who tried to take the mountain, but this young man defeated him. I don't know the story. I just quickly took this illustration because it illustrated what he did in terms of splintering the world. Next illustration. This is more ghastly, and this is Bartleby. I don't know whether you know Melville's Bartleby, but this is his interpretation of an American, the great Herman Melville's work. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. This is one of a tale that you can find in the Grimms. It's a standard, not standard. It's a very well-known type of tale throughout the world, and there are different versions. This is called The Blue Light, and it's about this soldier who is helped by a witch. He then discovers that the witch has this great power, a blue light beneath the ground. He steals it from her and then goes off and eventually gets even with a king who had maltreated him sometime before. At any rate, he's in prison here, and normally the character who's going to help him is not this idiotic-looking thing. It's just wonderful because, generally speaking, you have either a dog, a nice dog who helps him out, or some other little person who's sort of more is cuter than this character here. So it just sort of you have to sort of ask yourself what is going on here. Next, please. Okay, and this is the Golden Bird, and it's all about how a wolf or fox, I think it's a fox, helps this young man overcome some nasty people to marry a princess. And again, you get these. He's always adding these animals all over the place, and you never know why. Next, please. And the next, this one is four clever, yeah, these are the four clever brothers, 1, 2, 3, 4, who saved this princess from this dragon, and at the end, and they had been sent off by their father to learn different trades, and they're all experts in shooting, hearing, seeing, flying, and so things like that. And at the end, they defeat this dragon who had kidnapped this young woman, and then they quarrel as to who's going to marry her. And so, at the end of the story, of course you don't see it here, at the end of the story, the father says, well, since you can't make up your minds, I'm going to marry her. And it's a wonderful ending. Next tale. Oh, this is, I love this tale with these little characters over here. And this is the three children of fortune, and it's about how these three children bring back a fortune that they have stolen from these animals, and the animals come out and return and go on strike. and again, these characters, we think of fairy tales as being sweet, these sweet-looking characters, handsome, beautiful, and so on. And I love what he does all the time. He's very sardonic. Very sardonic. Next. Next. No?
Next?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, this is called The Goose Girl. It has many other names. It's about a princess who has a favorite horse, and she's sent to marry a wealthy prince, and on the way, a maid takes over, assumes her identity, and this is her horse, her favorite horse. And when they get to the place where the marriage is going to take place, and the maid is taking her place, she has the horse killed, the head chopped off, and put on put underneath a passage here. And so whenever they walk through this, the horse says, little princess, why have you not saved me? Why have you not done anything to reveal who you are, and so on and so forth. She eventually does, and the maid has her head chopped off.
Wonderful.
So, the next, sorry about that. Next one. This one I love. This is Rumpelstiltskin. And look at the character again. He adds little jokes constantly. These are the most, I would say, ugly people I've ever seen. And then poor Rumpelstiltskin has to try to pull his foot out of the ground. Next, please. Yes, and this is, you probably all know this one. It's Faithful John, and it's about a king who dies and asks his servant to serve the prince and protect him because he's somewhat naive, and he's never to look at a painting in a room, otherwise he'll fall in love with this woman who lives overseas, and then terrible things are going to happen. And so this is Faithful John, who Faithful John at one time had to kidnap a princess so that the prince could marry, her. And in the meantime, these crows reveal what he has to do in order to save the prince. So he's successful. Next, please. This goes back to the four brothers. One of them is tremendous at climbing trees and taking nests, and is able to talk to animals. And so this is goes back to that tale that I mentioned before. Next, please. And yeah, so remember, he's not supposed to see the princess. She's not particularly pretty. And then this is the faithful John over here. Once he sees that princess, he's sort of enchanted, and the servant has to help him. Next one. Oh, okay. So this is great. So finally, this is not part of the series. He at one time, and I think it was in the 1940s, he was Brandt was heavily influenced by Kafka, and he just adored everything that Kafka wrote. Had a sense of humor, liked the absurd, and so on and so forth. And so he decided to write a novel sometime called The Red Umbrella. He wrote this in the 1940s. And I want to read at a certain point to give you an idea of the influence of Kafka. Okay, great. Okay. So he writes this novel, and it's all about a punk guy called Mr. Blooming, and he's sort of out like this, and but he's always very well dressed, and he has a red umbrella. He goes into a forest, and there he meets two young people called Judy and I forget the other name, but it's obviously he's writing about his children, two of the children, and a third joins these two children who are lost in the woods. And Mr. Blooming runs around in the woods and bumps into different people, organizes all the squirrels and mice and other animals to fight against the Baron. Now, if you notice, who does this look like? So, the war was coming to an end, but Brandt obviously wanted to say something about the war. Okay, you get little things here, like a face from an egg, and this Baron, Mr. Blooming, wants to defeat this Baron, and at one point, let me read to you what a mouse tries to clarify what is happening in this plot. Okay, I know this plot is like Kafka in amazing ways. But he confuses, in doing this, the mouse confuses Peter and Susan even more than they have been confused. And so this is a quote. "You'd like to know what they are gazing at, of course. But first, I must tell you what's in the cellar of the house. Because in the cellar of the house is a little room with a white cupboard and a white table and a white chair and a white bed. And in that room ought to be the small giant. But the small giant is gone. And that is the big secret. You mustn't tell anybody, because only very, very few people have the slightest idea about it yet. And if they dare not say it to anybody, and nobody tells anybody anything about it, the seven sisters don't know yet. And nobody must tell nobody nothing about it. But I'll repeat it again. The small giant is gone."
Oh, that's wonderful.
And so it's a very complex novel. And let's turn to the final scene. That's Mr. Blooming falling on Hitler at the end, and they defeat the Baron and his ilk, and they just leave and they go their different ways, and there's no explanation about what has happened and why it has happened that way. But I think that this particular illustration, and again, notice this is all pencil, all pencil. So we'll end at that. I hope you've enjoyed my journey, and which is continuing. And I hope to be back here one day with another book, and perhaps a little more serious. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, yes. Does anybody have any?
This isn't a question, but
Yeah.
I love the way gravity and space and everything's so tippy, and that it would be a lovely way to say something to children about how confusing and chaotic that period of time was.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Now, I think that the children could probably understand him much better than I do. Yes.
Do you publish books that are written by anybody else than yourself, and books that are?
Oh, yeah, yeah. In the series, almost all the books in the series are by other authors.
Mhm.
I always write an afterword because I don't like to write forwards. And
So this is the purpose of this publishing firm, is specifically to publish these kinds of.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. Not my. I write comments.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, I was just struck by how unusual some of the characters look, and they look distraught, you know, and they look kind of sometimes angry and
Yeah.
you know, and I think of Resma Menakem, you know, he's a very popular writer in this area, and he talks about racism, and he says, well, you know, he doesn't say it like this, but it's like, don't y'all just want to be missionaries, you guys? You need to go back to your roots and find out all the wars. When you start worrying about people having PTSD and stuff like that, you got to think about what your ancestors have been through,
Yes.
fighting and tearing each other apart. And these characters are actually more like that,
Yeah.
and the traditional kind of fairy tale growth, where you know, it's kind of sanitized or.
Yes. Well, it's a
It's-
critique. You can take his work as a critique of your typical fairy tale.
Yeah.
I mean, he he illustrated these during the war. You know, he was an artist who was reacting to the war, and that's
Yeah.
why you get ugly, turmoil, chaotic scenes that are fantastic. And so, yeah, I agree. I think that it's really marvelous to see, you know, what he has done. So,
When did he
Yes.
die?
he died, I could have actually visited him had I known anything in 1986. So I was quite often in London during those days, and you know, well, serendipity is such that it may have been delayed, the discovery, but it was. I mean, I did discover him, and you know, I'm trying to promote. Almost all of these authors are just amazing. All the authors in the series, nobody knows about them, even in England or the United States. One of the books is ostrich. The story about the ostrich, and that particular it's all illustrated and written by a Hungarian Jew who escaped the Nazis and then published this book during the 1940s. So that's what I'm looking for. I still have many. I was forced to get rid of 8,000 of the books, but I have 2,000. And Carol is groaning back there, but I'm going to be.
Honey, I'm a book person. I just want them to cycle. Not sit on all our tables.
That's what tables are for.
Yes.
What motivated you to research the lesser popular?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always for the underdog. I consider myself in many ways an underdog, and I've always been attracted to people who are somewhat handicapped really deserve attention, really deserve to be recognized. And these authors, all of them, without exception, of the 7 books I've done thus far, are just brilliant. There's no other word for that. That's that British term, brilliant. I love it. So if I, had many more moons to see and much more money, I'd be hiring, people with whom I could work, and I'd get out a lot more books. I literally have gems, at least 100 to 200 more books that are amazing. Yes?
Any idea of who's buying these fairy tale books, these illustrated books?
The ones that I've
Yeah.
done? Yeah. Unfortunately, it's mainly in the Midwest. I don't have the money to,
Distributed further.
to hire a great distributor. I do have a wonderful publicist who's not here tonight, and she's helped me to a certain extent. So word has gotten around. If you go to Amazon, you can buy the books through Amazon.
But you want to
But
buy deer.
not here,
Yeah.
not in Minneapolis. No, but it's also, I was looking at the websites today, and I was astonished to see that if you just type in, Google the book, and this has nothing to do with Amazon or anything like that. There are people in England who have bought this book. So, I think I have a fairly good name in fairy tale studies, and so when I do something, people either hate me or love me, and they'll get it for both reasons. So, yes.
Got another question. If some of these people are brilliant, but they're not popularly known, and if you have other authors who are popularly known, let's see, how do I say this now? Just because you're not popularly known, that does not mean you don't have talent.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And the people who are popularly known might not have that much talent. Is that true?
Yeah, yes. Probably a lot of you will start booing me when I say, like, Harry Potter is terrible. It's a lousy book. And all 5 of them were 6. I don't know how many are there. And it's become a consumer item. It is a consumer item. What do you learn, from that particular series and so on? So, in other words, the world is unfair. The world has always been unfair, and so that's why as long as I live, I'm going to try to help the underdog who really should be recognized. I'm not in competition with the so-called famous or well-known books, but I think that when people who really cherish art look at the differences between these works, I think that they'll realize that something is wrong in our appreciation of these very popular works that I think are thin, out there just because they want to be part of the mode. They want. So I'm happy doing what I'm doing, and I hope I can cause some consternation in the world. Okay, thank you very much for coming. And I guess I'm supposed to go to the front?
Yes.